I want to introduce you to a very special person who has contributed the latest volume in our series, The Story of Indian Business by Penguin. It's called Goras and Desis. And this book, as you know, is part of a series of books on India's economic business history, about the different tales of trade. This particular volume deals with the managing agency system, which is an Indian innovation in industrial organization. And we're going to talk today about how this came up, how successful it was. It happened certainly after the end of the decline of the East India Company led to private traders, British traders coming up, Indian traders coming up. But it was really only after the British Raj took over did the big impetus come. And at that time, we all remember, especially those of us from Calcutta, remember the names like McKinnon, McKinsey, Andrew Yule, Bird and Company, Shaw Wallace. They were the sort of legendary names in the 19th century in Calcutta. So let me begin by asking you, Omkar, what is a managing agency?
It's a very simple and an extremely complex structure. Think of it as for any of you, think of it as a holding company. A company which is limited liability or a partnership which has shares in various different enterprises. So in the context of Eastern India, for instance, a typical large managing agency would float companies under its control in tea gardens, in jute mills, in collieries, in transportation, in inland shipping.
Right.
And they would then float them into the market, have controlling interest, have other people come in and invest in the company, and almost like a holding company, control the affairs of it, not just in terms of the dividends that they got, but in terms of pretty much every controlling thing, managerial and otherwise.
So a few individuals, managing partners of this managing agency, were able to control a vast empire.
Absolutely.
Of economic enterprises.
Absolutely. And if you have names, let's start with one European name and one Indian name. The European name, except you perhaps and I and some others, will not know. Someone like Edward Benthall of Bird and Company had control as the managing partner of Bird, complete control over 60 enterprises, all of them listed in India. But if you were to think of another name,
Indian name.
Yeah, it's Ghanshyam Das Birla. I mean, he started Birla Brothers, and over time, G.D. Birla, through Birla Brothers and one other managing agency, controlled something like 14 to 15 major companies. So managing agencies were the form of control, and it was a form of control that, barring G.D. Birla, who always wanted to have majority, was a form of control where you could control with very little ownership.
Yeah, but Omkar, explain to me that you have a few people controlling a lot of enterprises, but success of an enterprise comes when you focus. In other words, instead of this very...
I'm not sure about that, by the way. This is this old story which has been proven either occasionally right and occasionally wrong, and several historians as well as business economists and people in business schools have talked about whether you should have horizontal control or focused control.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not,
I'm a believer in sticking to your knitting if you want to be successful.
The knitting belief comes from your having worked in an American company where almost all conglomerates in the United States were vertical. All major conglomerates were vertical.
Right.
But outside of the US,
a
huge number of conglomerates are horizontal. Look at the Zaibatsus in Japan before the war. After the war, the Keiretsus in Korea, the chaebols.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
look at Li Ka-shing. What is the verticality? It's a lot of horizontal control.
Correct.
Look at LVMH.
Yeah.
Horizontal control.
Or now look at the Tatas with
I mean, again,
$100 billion enterprise.
yeah, but they still have
with about 50 companies.
with horizontal control, not vertical control.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
vertical control is very much a US
Yeah.
and occasionally
Maybe-
German thing.
yeah.
It is not a thing throughout the rest of the world.
Yeah, true, true. I want you to tell us about Dwarkanath Tagore.
He's an amazing character. He was an amazing character.
How he is one of the originators of
He's an
this
absolutely
very,
amazing character.
This pioneer, and how he actually died
Well,
after, when we don't hear much about.
Well, it's very
about,
simple as that. He was a very rich man. He was Zamindar. He came from the Tagore family. He's the grandfather of Rabindranath Tagore. And he was an extremely rich man, had all sorts of trading interests, and decided somewhere down the line that the best way of leveraging the coal mines that he had got in North Bengal was doing two things. One is to have a ferry system which would ferry the coal to Calcutta, otherwise there was no value. But second is to create a firm which would control both, in which he would have sufficient control and have lots of shareholders come in and buy shares in both the companies, but he, through Car Tagore and Company, would be the managing agents
Correct.
of it. So he was indeed,
Yeah,
there's
the
no question,
pioneer.
the pioneer. He was the first managing
But then why
agent.
did it die?
Well, he died because he certainly moved into too many things. He was a very bad manager. He was a great innovative thinker. He
Right.
was a terribly bad manager. He had very poor partners. He had a poor organization for control.
Yeah.
So he actually is an example of why a totally innovative man very often makes for a very bad organizer of business.
Right, very good point, Omkar. And really, with him died Bengali entrepreneurship, because Bengalis
much
are
so.
not known.
Pretty much so.
Calcutta was controlled afterwards by the Marwadis, not the Bengalis.
Barring, I must say, I mean, there were no large Bengali business houses, except in two areas. They had significant control in the publishing business. Even today, Ananda Bazar Patrika is controlled by a family, right?
Right.
And the Ananda Bazar Patrika group, and they had significant interest in some other key businesses, which were like advanced businesses in the context of the early 20th century. Bengal Chemicals, Bengal
Yeah.
Pharmaceuticals, and things like that.
So let's move this story forward. And it's very interesting that the story you've told is how the process began with a Bengali English company, Tagore Car and Tagore.
Car Tagore and Company.
And slowly it moved then to the Indians.
It started with Car Tagore and Company under Dwarkanath, then it failed. Then the British took over,
Yeah.
as you said, Mackinnon McKinsey,
Right.
Gillanders Arbuthnot, then later Andrew Yule,
Yeah.
Bird and Heilgers, Jardine Skinner, the whole lot of them, right?
But then obviously
But the-
afterwards the Indian entrepreneurs.
1921 is the turning point. After the First World War, when again a young man who made lots of money in speculation and earlier in opium trade, young man decided he's going to start getting into manufacturing, and that man was Ghanshyam Das Birla. And through Birla Brothers,
Right.
he set up Birla Jute, and then got into cotton textiles.
Right.
And seeing Birla
Grasim.
succeed,
Yeah.
many more Marwadis got into the fray, and not just in jute
Yeah.
or in collieries, but in other areas of business, as
And-
well as others. Gujaratis like Gagal Bhai.
And then, of course, the British agencies started declining while the Indian agencies came up.
And also in the West, I mean, we were talking about Bengal. I mean, in the West, there were the Parsis. There were
Yeah.
several Parsi made
Correct. Western India.
led in the West, Western India, led by the Tatars.
Right.
But there were also many other
Yeah.
Hindu
Wadias.
or Muslim-led managing agencies,
Correct.
which were in Western India.
In
So
fact, the Industrial Revolution, the cotton textile
was entirely by
in the
the
hands of Indian hands.
Indian managing agencies.
Indian hands. The question is, why did they adopt this particular organization, what makes this organization so successful and attractive that it was the premier organization?
So, let me
believe-
quickly answer this.
Just to say, just to tell the viewers that in 1915, 70% of India's assets, industrial assets, were with managing agents.
So let me answer this very quickly, very quickly. In a time when it was difficult to access capital and banks only gave you bill discounting facilities and working capital loans, you needed a form where you had many companies that you control going through different business cycles, not all going down at the same time, either all going up the same time or counter-cyclical, so that I could take money from these, not only through dividends, but different ways, in order to make others grow. So at a time when you didn't have sufficient capital in terms of credit, this was a very good risk-averse system. But the moment the financial institutions came up, IDBI, IFCI, and ICICI, and the moment term loans were available at reasonable prices, indeed discounted prices,
Right.
this was no longer a
So
particularly...
scarce capital, but also scarce management.
Scarce capital, scarce entrepreneurship, and scarce managerial skills
Right.
easily allow for this to take place and grow.
Right.
When at least one, if not two of those scarcities disappear, alternate forms come in.
Right. And tell me then the sort of verdict on these. Was it good for India's development when it grew?
Absolutely, without a shade of doubt. The fact that, by the way, let me say this very clearly, no colonial entity between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, no colonial entity, at the time it became independent, had as much share of manufacturing and industry as India did, and that was 10% of GDP. Not 27% as it is today, 10%, but it was amazing. And almost all of that occurred because of the managing agency system.
Good. Now, what I wanted to come to was the final fall of the managing agency. What were the governance problems that led to the decline and death of the managing agency
two things.
system?
The proximate causes were two terrible scandals that took place. One was a scandal involving Mundra, and the other scandal was involving a very large industrialist who created such a terrible scandal that he was jailed.
You can mention the name, by the way.
So it was Ramakrishna Dalmia.
So the end result?
So that end result was public opinion was going against it big time. The second, of course, was that alternative forms of financing were made available through banks and financial institutions in particular, term loan. Third is that if I could control, because of generous loans from IDBI, IFCI, ICICI, a company, without spreading it thin across many shareholders, why would I want to go through this inefficient structure when an alternate structure happened?
Correct. And really, at the end of the day, frankly, the world changed.
Yes.
India changed. India became a country with capital,
and eventually,
with management,
and eventually, by
with
the way,
entrepreneurship.
there is a plus ça change. I mean, the more things change, more they remain the same situation. In 1970, it was banned. Managing agencies were banned under the Companies Act. But the fact of the matter is, many of the forms of managing agency exist today. They may not be called such, but if you were to look at large conglomerates, they do exactly what a large managing agency did.
Thank you, Omkar. This is the book, Goras and Desis. Very nice title that Omkar has come up with. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.